What is up guys, it's Topsy and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we are going to be continuing on with my little journey of fixing every single character deck from every single SpeedDuel box. So far in this series we've already fixed up the Duel Academy box, we fixed up Midterm Paradox, and of course my favorite SpeedDuel box, Duelist of Shadows. And trying to stick with chronological order, next box up is none other than Streets of Battle City. And this is going to be a really fun box to explore just because a surprising amount of changes of these character decks can be made with only using SpeedDuel cards, which is actually really exciting. Alright then, but before we do get started though, I do want to go ahead and preface all the little boundaries we're going to be setting for ourselves when fixing up each of these character decks. First off, we still want to try and keep the idea that Konami originally had for each of these characters. That means that we're not going to be trying to scrap the whole idea as a whole, but instead making tweaks here and there in order to make the decks feel somewhat more competitive against each other. Additionally, we're going to be working with the original skills these decks came with, and that means we can't use any outside skills or any custom skills for each of these character decks. And finally, for the most part, I'm going to try and stick primarily to the SpeedDuel card pool, but if I find it necessary, I will use cards outside of the pool in order to fix up some of these character decks. Now then, with all introductions out of the way, let's dive right in. Alright then, so the very first character we're going to be working with is none other than Yugi himself, and honestly, Yugi's spell counter strategy from Streets of Battle City is one of the decks that it took me a minute in order to appreciate what the deck actually was. I remember the first time I saw this deck, I was very reluctant to show any sort of appreciation for it and thinking it was just very bland, boring, and whatever, but the more I played with it, the more fun it actually ended up being. So what exactly is Yugi's deck trying to accomplish? We have two separate strategies this deck is trying to enable with both of the skills the deck comes with. The first one being a spell counter strategy where you try to accumulate as many spell counters as possible to go ahead and recycle and use multiple times the effects of these cards. As for the second strategy this deck is trying to enable, well, it's a Dark Paladin strategy where we have cards like Dark Magician, Buster Blader in order to go ahead and facilitate their fusion summon. But what exactly would we fix? First things first, I don't particularly like the Dark Paladin aspect of this deck for a few reasons. First, they already did this in the original Battle City box, so redoing it again feels a bit like a cop-out. So we're going to be removing Dark Paladin, Buster Blader, and Skilled White Magician because we don't have Buster Blader in the deck anymore. And because we removed the Buster Blader things, we're going to also be removing Destruction Swordsman Fusion. We're actually going to keep Dark Magician because we are keeping Skilled Dark Magician. Also, I kind of also want to remove Dark Magician Girl just because this is just such an awkward card in this deck and she doesn't work with spell counters, so this card just feels like it doesn't belong. Additionally, we're going to be removing Malice of Dispersion because it's just a bad card in SpeedDuels. And lastly, we're going to be removing Solitary Sword of Poison, not because it's a bad card, but because I have a better equip spell for the deck. And with that, we've made a lot of changes to the deck already. So what would I add in the stead of the cards we've removed? Well, first things first, we're going to be adding a lot more spell counter cards, and the cool thing about this is that all these cards we're going to be adding in are all cards that are actually legal in SpeedDuels, those being Magical Marionette, Dark Red Enchanter, and Maiden of Macabre. These three cards in addition make the deck feel so much better. Macabre gives you a lot more attack power, alongside Dark Red Enchanter and Magical Marionette being the high level monsters in the deck that replace Buster Blader and Dark Magician Girl. In addition, we're also going to be adding in Wonder Wand. I think it was a big misstep not to add Wonder Wand to this deck specifically. It's all spellcaster monsters and it also gives you the versatility of drawing you two cards. It just seemed like such a freebie to give this card to the deck, so we're going to be adding it ourselves. One last card that I want to go ahead and add in is Magician's Circle. The main reason I want to add Magician's Circle to this deck is because, again, we have a pure spellcaster based strategy. And the cool thing about this is that we can pretty much summon out anything in the deck with the exception of Dark Magician via the effect of Magical Circle. This makes it summoning cards like Magical Marionette and Dark Red Enchanter a lot easier. The last change that I would make to this deck is a little difficult to make because there's so many different paths we can take. If we wanted to keep all the cards only in the SpeedDuel pool, then a good addition would be Arcane Barrier. But in my opinion, one of the best cards we can add to this deck specifically is none other than Magical Citadel of Endymion. Essentially what this card allows you to do is that each time a spell card is activated, you place a spell counter on it, and it pretty much just keeps holding on to more and more spell counters. But the cool thing about this field spell is that whenever you want to activate an effect of a monster that uses spell counters, you can take the spell counters from this field spell in order to activate the effect, which makes it really cool and allows you to do so much with this strategy. But besides these two cards in particular, there's a few more cards we can add in. Cards like Defender of Magical Knight, we have Magical Exemplar, we have Mythical Beast of Cerberus, or one of my personal choices that I thought would be kind of cool to see would have been the Silent Magician level 4 and level 8. Just because these are iconic cards that Yugi used later on in the anime. But in the end, I think the card that we need to give them is Magical Citadel of Endymion. And with that, we've fixed up Yugi's strategy. This deck feels so much stronger now. It just gives you so much more versatility because of the field spell you have access to. So I feel like this version of it should be a lot more fun to pilot. And of course, I did mention that if you want to keep it all cards in speed duels only, then I would just replace the Citadel with the Arcane Barrier. This card is way less impactful, but still not a bad card. So it's up to you guys. Alright, then next up we have Yugi's best friend with Joey. And Joey's deck is interesting just because one of the issues that I had with fixing up this strategy is trying to find cards that didn't have too much overlap with the deck he ended up receiving in Battle City Finals, which that deck is essentially just an upgraded version of what we have here. So I think I found a way to make this deck better without making it feel like a carbon copy of the other one he received. Essentially what Joey's deck is trying to do in Streets of Battle City is we have two separate strategies in one. The first one being a Gearfried the Iron Knight kind of beatdown strategy where you have Gearfried be like an untargetable monster, and it's fairly effective. While the other one, it's kind of broken with Art of Warriors, where essentially you're just able to cheat out any vanilla fusion monster in your extra deck for essentially free. And that kind of ensures that you always have a monster on your field. And I thought it was pretty broken the first time I ever saw the skill. So yeah, both decks kind of work with each other. And honestly, if you were to pick one of the strategies to work with, I would typically always go with Heart of Warriors just because it's an overall really good skill. And that's what we're working around as well. So first things first, what changes would I make for this strategy? Well, first off, I'm removing the Polymerization, Baby Dragon, and Time Wizard. This little combo right here feels so out of place, and I get it, it's a Joey deck, but oh my goodness, these cards are just terrible on their own. Your deck doesn't support fusion summoning them. It's just like, oh, if you drew all three of these together, you can, congratulations, make Thousand Dragon, I guess. And you know, while we're on that note, we're also going to be getting rid of Alligator Swordsman, just because it's not even a warrior monster, so we can't even like give it the support of cards like Lightning Blade or Reinforcement of the Army. So it just, this little package right here feels so out of place, so we're getting rid of it. Last card I'm going to be removing is also Free, the Matchless General. If you know me at all, you know what distaste I have for this card. It's just like a personal beef I have with him. I overall just don't think it's that good of a card. I don't know. I mean, the deck already has Rhoda, and it just seems like so much effort just to search out a warrior monster every turn. And the thing is, you're not even searching out, you're giving up your draw phase in order to get access to a warrior monster. So I feel like there's better cards we can give this deck over Freed. And besides that, we're going to be keeping pretty much everything else the same. So what are the additions we're going to be adding to the strategy? Well, first things first, we're going to give the deck a lot more warrior support with cards like Exile Force, Gearfried the Red Eyes Iron Knight. We're going to give the deck as well Battle Survivor and Goblin Attack Force. Goblin Attack Force being a cool choice in this deck just because it's an actual Joey card, and it pretty much does the same thing Freed can do, being a big ass body on the field, and it's also a warrior, so it works out really well. Additionally, giving the deck an access to Gearfried the Red Eyes Iron Knight is really cool too, because we can have extra synergy with Blasphemous Chain as well. Lastly, we're also going to be giving this deck Warrior Returning Alive in order to get access to some of your better monsters in Gearfried and other Gearfried. And with that, I believe we've pretty much fixed up Joey's deck. The deck feels a lot more consistent, we are enabling our beatdown a lot better, and because we don't have to worry about fusion summoning anymore, because we're going to be working off Heart of the Warrior, you don't have to have Poly in the deck anymore. So with that, I think Joey is done. Up next, we have one of the decks that I was the most excited to play from this set, that being Mako's Fortress Well strategy. But to my dismay, the deck wasn't as good as I had hoped it would have been. And the main reason being is that the deck revolves around making Fortress Well, which is a really cool card, but unfortunately it's still vanilla, and at that it's a ritual monster. So it was destined to fail if the skill wasn't absolutely broken. And it wasn't. It's a fairly standard ritual based skill that gives Fortress Well a nice little effect. In addition, it gives you access to either the ritual monster or the ritual spell, which is cool, but still it doesn't make summoning this card any easier. And as for Mako's other skill, that being a Bountiful Ocean, well, this skill revolves around using Umi as a form of protecting all your monsters. Additionally, it also gives you some level of recursion with your water cards in the graveyard, and I think as a whole, it's a really nice skill. I think that for this deck, I'm going to be focusing around building the Bountiful Ocean skill, just because I feel like we can have a lot more utility with this skill. With that being said, how would I go about fixing up Mako's strategy? Well, the first thing I would go ahead and do is I'm replacing Umi with a Legendary Ocean. There's really no reason not to do this. While yes, it's not going to be boosting up every single monster in your deck. I'm looking at you, Flying Fang. For the most part, the utility of reducing the level of every monster in your hand by 1 is huge, just because it allows you to summon cards like a Legendary Fisherman number 2 a lot easier. Continuing on, I'm also going to be removing Big Wave, Small Wave. And the main reason I'm going to be doing this is because this card's bad. I don't like it. And that's all I have to say about it. We have other ways of summoning water monsters easier in this deck with Water Hazard. And instead, there's 2 different cards that I considered adding in. One of them being Moray of Greed, just to have some level of consistency and in order to see cards you need a lot easier. But the other one in particular is Pre-Preparation of Rites. Because I am focusing the deck around a Bountiful Ocean, this just seems too perfect not to add into this deck. Having a way of giving you access to both these cards is so useful, and it's going to help you a lot with your card advantage. After that, there's a few monsters that I want to remove from the deck, those being Fiend Kraken, Air Orca, and the Legendary Fisherman. I know it feels almost criminal removing the Legendary Fisherman from the deck, but we already have Legendary Fisherman number 2, so having both of them in the same deck feels a little redundant. And as for Air Orca, I think it's a neat card, but realistically, this card is very difficult to work with, especially if you don't have a deck revolving around it. So we're not even going to bother with it. And now for the cards we're going to be replacing them with. Well, some of those card options we have are, first off, Warrior of Atlantis. I feel like if you're going to be playing this deck, you need to add this card. The tandem of a Legendary Ocean and Warrior of Atlantis is just too goated not to combine, and having multiple ways of getting access to your field spell a lot easier is just so nice. So I think this is like a package deal you can't go without. So one of the things that I wanted to do with the deck is give them more big monsters they can summon. And Terror King Salmon was one of the cards that was added into the miscellaneous cards that just works so well here. Having a normal summonable 2600 attack monster with the help of Legendary Ocean is insane. So adding it in here fits really well. Now for the last option for the deck. If you really wanted to make this deck that much better, adding in Trap Infecting Virus is like a no-brainer. It's a water, and at that it allows you some level of versatility to go ahead and wipe your opponent's field. It's just too good. Not only that, but because the Bountiful Ocean has the added effect of being able to add a water monster from your graveyard to your hand, it's almost like you have to pay nothing in order to activate Trap Infecting Virus. So that's my option. But some other honorable options you can add into this deck are the following. You could add in Manju of the 10,000 Hands if you didn't want to add Preparation of Rites. I don't know why you wouldn't, because this card just works too well in this deck, but that same applies to Sonic Bird and Senju. Other cards you could add in are cards like Gale Lizard. It's a water. It gives you some level of versatility with the fact that you can bounce cards your opponent has, but I feel like we have better cards that can do that already. Another one is Aqua Spirit. It's a really cool monster. It's a special summon, and in fact, it has a really nice effect where it can change the battle position of your opponent's cards. So that's kind of neat. But as a whole, I feel like this version of the deck feels that much better. Being able to still facilitate the effects of Fortress Well via the effect of Pre-Preparation Rites, having access to your Umi a lot easier via the Warrior of Atlantis. I just think this deck feels so much better, but give me your thoughts. Up next, we have one of the most broken decks to come out of a SpeedDuel box in Weevil's Insect Strategy, and my goodness, this deck is ridiculous. And well, the main thing that makes this deck broken is the skill, and we'll get to that in a second. So the changes that I ended up making to the deck were some that, and they might have been a bit too much, honestly, in my opinion, but there were just some cards that really needed to be cut. But now, what's this deck trying to do and how is it doing this? Well, essentially, Weevil has a insect-based strategy, that revolves around 2 different cards. Insect Queen and Parasite. And both the skills are really cool. The main skill in Insect Infestation allows you to facilitate the effect of Parasite a lot easier, while My Precious Queen allows you to normal summon cards like Insect Queen significantly easier by just tributing 1 monster. And at that, the broken part about the skill that got it banned is the fact that it special summons you a token at the end phase of either player's turn, which is ridiculous. Now that we understand what exactly the deck is trying to do and what made it so broken, what are the changes that I would make for it? First things first, there are a few cards the deck has that are just bad cards as a whole. 2 of the cards that come to mind immediately are Magnetic Mosquito and Goki Boar. I see no argument to keep a card like Gokiborn nor Magnetic Mosquito in this deck, just because one is so specific in only removing machine monsters on the field, and the other is a vanilla. So we're going to be getting rid of both these cards. Another card that I wanted to go and remove from the deck is Multiplication of Ants, and the main reason for this is the fact that getting rid of one of your insect monsters in order to get 2 lackluster tokens that can't be attributed for a tribute summon kind of feel pointless, so we're going to be removing it. Another card that I kind of wanted to remove is Metal Armored Bug, and the main reason for that is that it's a level 8 monster, so the skill My Precious Queen doesn't help it to be able to summon a lot easier. Alright then, so these are all the cards that we're going to be removing. Everything else is going to stay in the deck just because I feel like it has some utility in the strategy. Now, what are the cards that we're going to be adding in? First things first, we're going to be adding Brain Crusher into this deck as a replacement for Metal Armored Bug. This card is significantly better, and it kind of does mog the addition of Insect Queen to the deck, but we can live with that. Additionally, one of the cards that I want to go ahead and add into this deck is Corrosive Scales. This is a card that was introduced in the original Ultimate Predator starter deck for Weevil, and it's a really cool card that it essentially tries to weaken all your opponent's monsters. Not only that, but one of my favorite things about this trap card is the fact that you can equip it onto any of your insect monsters, preferably one of your boss cards like Insect Queen and or Brain Crusher, in order to force your opponent to have to attack these Goliaths on the field. And forcing your opponent to have to deal with that card specifically is really cool. Lastly, we have some spots open for monsters that we can add into this deck, and there are quite a few cards we can add. One of the ones that I wanted to add in is Reversible Beetle, just because it's one of the cards that we ended up getting in the miscellaneous pile, and it's such a neat little card that doesn't see any play ever, and I kind of wanted to give it some room to shine. The last card is up to preference. So for me, I'm a person that values consistency, so I'm going to be going with Goki Pawn in order to search out the Parasite Paranoid, which is a ridiculous card. But if you prefer some damage, then giving yourself Crossfire Beetle is another great option in order to do some nasty piercing damage. And with that, we fixed up Weevil's deck. This deck is ridiculous, as I already mentioned. My Precious Queen is a nasty skill, but even with the changes we ended up making, Insect Infestation still works really well with it, just because of the fact that we have a lot more versatile monsters in the deck already that you can use for. But give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Oh boy. Next up, we have none other than one of the worst characters from the SpeedDuel boxes, that being Espa Roba. If you've seen my tier list videos, then you should be no strangers to the fact that I think Espa Roba, both of his decks are some of the worst constructed strategies we've ever seen in SpeedDuels. When you look at the deck, it kind of speaks for itself. The main thing we're trying to do is summon out Jinzo and then evolve it into Jinzo Lord, but you have no real easy way of doing it. Even if you take a look at both the skills the deck has access to, in the main skill of Intel of the Cosmo, it just tells you where your opponent's hand looks like, and as for the Machine Menace, while it does make summoning Jinzo easier, it has the condition of your opponent having to have a face-up trap card in order to activate this skill. What? Like, I just don't know in what world both these skills are viable in order to make this specific deck, like, good. And this is exactly what I ended up doing in order to fix it. First things first, we have to get rid of some of the worst monsters this deck has access to in Gargoyle and Cyber Raider. These two cards in particular are egregious. Gargoyle is a pitiful vanilla, and Cyber Raider is a card that deals with equip spells, and the deck has access to one equip spell. I don't know why Konami decided this was a good idea to add it to the deck, so we're getting rid of both of them. Now we move on to some more cards that just don't really make sense in this deck in particular. One of them being Gift of Martyr. Gift of Martyr is a neat card, but in a deck like this where you are struggling for board presence, giving up one of them in order to power up another is neat, but you're not going to be able to pull this off. And finally, we're also going to be getting rid of Amplifier, just because for the most part, you shouldn't need to activate your own trap cards if you already have an established Jinzo. So Amplifier just feels kind of out of place in this deck as well. And besides that, these are the only cards that we're going to be removing. I know, I was surprised as well, the fact that I didn't just scrap the whole deck as a whole, but I think I found a way to go ahead and salvage it. First things first, we're going to give the deck Swords of Revealing Light. This card is huge, just because if you're able to stall off for a whole 3 turns in order to get access to like your Jinzo, then you should have an easier time winning a duel. After that, one of the cards that I feel like is a non-negotiable addition to the deck has to be Jinzo Jector. If you're unfamiliar with this card, what this guy essentially does is that he takes the name Jinzo on field, which is huge because it also benefits you from the spell card Cyber Energy Shock. But the coolest thing about this card is that you're able to tribute him in order to add a Jinzo monster from your deck to your hand. This includes Jinzo, Jinzo Returner, and Jinzo Lord, a card that is extremely difficult to search out in the deck. But in addition to being able to search out any of these guys, the coolest thing about this card is the fact that when you tribute him and search out one of your Jinzos, if your opponent had any trap cards set when you activated this card, then that means that you can special summon as many Jinzo cards in your hand as possible up to the number of set trap cards your opponent had. And I feel like for the most part, it should be fairly balanced. But you know what? It's a Jinzo deck, it's a Roba, he needs the help, so I figured that a somewhat broken monster should be okay in the deck. Continuing on, we have another spell card that I wanted to give the deck, but it might be a bit overkill at this point just because we do have Jinzo Jector. But the card that I was thinking about is Law of the Cosmos. And this card in particular is really cool because of the way it works. Essentially what this card does, it allows your opponent to set a trap card from their hand or their deck, but if they decide to do so, you are then allowed to special summon a Jinzo from your deck. But if they decide, nah, I'm good, I don't want to set a trap card, then this card instead adds you a Jinzo from your deck or one monster that specifically lists Jinzo in its text. So essentially this card allows you to search out your Jinzo Returner, your Jinzo Lord, and or Jinzo Jector. I think this type of versatility is really cool, but if this card seems a bit too strong in your opinion, there's other cards that we can add in. And that would be the last two cards that I have right here, those being Pandaborg and Grapple Blocker. So the main reason I have these two cards in particular are for the following. The deck revolves around psychic monsters and machine monsters, and these are two fairly okay psychic cards that work fairly well in the deck. My personal choice would have been Pandaborg with this strategy in order to special summon cards like Frankenderp and or Destructotron from the deck. Not only that, but if your opponent gets rid of it, it still gives you a monster in addition on your turn to then tribute summon for something like Spell Canceller or Jinzo if you really needed to. But the other card that we have here, Grapple Blocker, it's neat in the way that it works because it's able to target a monster your opponent controls on normal summon and keep it from doing anything. It can't be tributed, it can't attack, as long as this card remains on field. But if you don't care about that effect, it also has 2k defense in order to survive a turn in order to tribute summon for Jinzo or the Spell Canceller. And with that, I feel like we fixed the Jinzo deck fairly well. Again, this was one of the weirdest decks to fix just because of how poorly designed it is. Realistically, if you're playing this deck with these changes, go with, I guess, Intel from the Cosmos as your skill, just because it doesn't hurt to have constant knowledge of what your opponent is playing. But these are the changes. Give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Moving on from Espa Roba, we have Rare Hunter. And if I thought Espa Roba was a difficult deck to fix, Rare Hunter took that to another level. Just because there's no theming here. Not exactly. Essentially what his deck's supposed to consist of is a bunch of rare cards that he's taken from other players. I even took a look at the skills to see if there's anything to go off of whenever fixing them, but for the most part, again, no. He has very generic skills that kind of work. Like we have Collector, where it allows you to discard 2 cards of different typings, that being monster, spell, or trap card. And then whatever card you did not discard, you can search from your deck. It's a very unique way of searching anything, but it's not super reliable. And as for the other skill, stocked by the Rare Hunter, this skill works in a very interesting way, where it's a once per duel effect where you're able to discard a card and then choose a monster in your opponent's graveyard that was sent and destroyed that very turn, and then set it on your field. I didn't have all that much direction when fixing up his deck, and this is what I ended up coming up with. First things first, the flaws of this strategy is that you don't really do anything. For the most part, you're kind of just like chilling with like a big monster sometimes, and or you have like your set cards like Mask or Magician of Faith. It doesn't work that well, so we have to find some cards that kind of help you out more. And because of that, we're going to be removing both Twister and Ledger of a Ledgerman. These two cards in particular don't really do all that much for you. Also, we already have Night Beam in the deck, so it kind of just seems like we're double dipping for no reason. And Ledgerman, while it's cool, honestly, I kind of doubt you're going to survive that many turns. So Ledgerman just feels like a pointless card in the strategy. So in their stead, we're going to be adding in 2 rarer cards in Monster Reborn and Sakuretsu Armor. Now, this fixes the deck a lot more just because, for one, it's giving you a monster on field in order to tribute summon for Parshaft, but additionally, we have ways to protect your monsters on the field in order to tribute for Parshaft. So I think that's a cool way of incorporating that. After that, we're going to be replacing the Dark Red Enchanter, Red Ice Black Dragon, and Twin Barrel Dragon. I don't think I should explain why I am replacing Dark Red Enchanter and Red Ice Black Dragon. These two cards do not work in this deck, and they do nothing. It would have been a different story if he had a skill that worked around Red Eyes or something, or maybe even a tribute monster, but it doesn't. Lastly, Twin Barrel Dragon. I think the card's cool, but there's some better options that I wanted to give the deck instead of Twin Barrel. So we're going to be removing it as well. And besides that, everything else is going to be staying. Now, the cards we're going to be adding in their stead are the following. The first one being Witch of the Black Forest. Witch of the Black Forest, again, kind of fits the theming of rare cards, and also it's a phenomenal card to search out the whole deck. In addition, I also want to go ahead and give the deck another tribute monster. And I thought that Mephis the Infernal General would have been a really cool one because it kind of pairs up with Parshaft. They're like the opposites of each other. Now, for the last card we add into this deck, I was torn between what I wanted to give the deck more. There's Injection Fairy Lily and there's Spirit of the Reaper. I feel like both these cards work really well in the deck. Reaper is gonna ensure the fact that you're gonna have an easier time summoning out your tribute monster, but Lily gives you some real bite on your field. Honestly, this is up to preference as to what exactly you prefer in this deck, but I think I'm gonna end up going with Reaper. And the main reason I'm gonna go with Reaper is because it's a dark monster, which goes ahead and synergizes better with Allure Darkness. And with that, we've done our best to fix Rare Hunter. But yeah, weird deck to work with. Give me your thoughts. What would you have done? I was literally so lost fixing this deck, so I'm so curious to see what you guys think about this one. We're now onto the last two decks of this box, and the first one we're going to be covering is Arkana's Dark Magician deck. And it is kind of funny to think about that we ended up getting two separate Dark Magician decks in this box, one being the spell counter version and this being a more, I guess, pure version of it. For the most part, I'm a pretty big fan of what they did for Arkana. His main skill in Now You See Them is really cool in the way that it works, because it allows you to have an up to 5 card draw based on how many Dark Magicians you shuffle back into the deck, which is kind of neat. But as for the other skill, it's a little more lackluster because it gives your opponent the option of either destroying a monster they control or sending a card from their hand to the graveyard, but still, it's kind of neat. Typically, I feel like if you're going to be playing this deck, just go with Now You See Them. It works better, it makes your bricks feel like less of bricks, and it's really neat in the way that it works. Now then, the deck is very simple in the way that it's supposed to function. You either summon a big ass spellcaster monster, or you set something like Legion, which can search you out Dark Magician. It's, again, there's not much depth to this deck, so let me show you what exactly we did in order to fix it. First things first, we got rid of Steelmaster Masai. This card's terrible. For the effort of summoning this guy out with his adjacent spell, contagious trap card, you could have just done that better with a spell counselor or a Jinzo. Last card we're going to be getting rid of in the deck is Summoner's Art, and the main reason is because typically you don't want to see Dark Magician in your hand. You have a skill that tries to get rid of him, and the main reason is because the deck already has multiple ways of summoning Dark Magician on its own, those being Dark Renewal and Dark Magic Current. The deck already does that fairly well on its own, and because you're playing 3 copies of it, yes, the deck had 3 copies of Dark Magician in it, getting a 4th copy with Summoner's Art is just not necessary, so we're going to get rid of it as well. It's just redundant. And that's pretty much the only changes we're going to make for the deck. Now, what are the additions we're going to be adding? Well, first card that came to mind immediately was Magikuribo. It feels weird giving Arkana Magikuribo just because this card just feels like such a Yugi card, but it just works really well because if you take any battle damage, you can special summon Dark Magician from the deck or graveyard, my bad. And that's really cool. It's already a card that exists in the game, and we are solely basing the whole strategy around Dark Magician. The deck wants to summon out Dark Magician, so Magikuribo works too well in this deck. Now, besides Magikuribo, what else are we adding to this strategy? Well, I wanted to go ahead and give the deck some more versatility with their back row, and there's a few cards we can add in. Of course, we have like the boring options that every deck can get access to, like Wall of Disruption and Sakuretsu Armor. These cards are never bad additions to any deck you're working with, but also there's Shadow Spell, which is a lot cooler just because your monsters are already pretty big on their own, and you don't particularly need to get rid of them via the effect of like a wall or the Karetsu armor. So we're going to be giving the deck Shadow Spell. Additionally, another card that came to mind was giving the deck an additional copy of Dark Renewal. One of the things that I noticed from this SpeedDuel box in particular is that Tsunami double dipped a lot with some of the characters, like Joey getting 2 copies of Gearfried the Iron Knight in this deck, or Yugi getting 2 copies of Spell Power Grasp in his deck. So it's not a stretch to think that this deck could get an additional copy of Dark Renewal in order to tribute off any of your spellcaster monsters to special summon out the Dark Magician. But if that sounds like a bit too meh, then you can go ahead and add a copy like Witch of the Black Forest into this deck in order to search out Magic Karibo, or I think almost any of these guys. Yeah, you can search out pretty much everything with the exception of Double Custom or Dark Magician with the effect of Witch of the Black Forest. Also, she works in the deck really well because she is a dark spellcaster as well. The last card that we can add into this deck is going to fall into your personal preference. And one of the cards that came to mind was the Tricky. This card just kind of feels like it was a card meant for Arkana. Kind of just gives the vibe. It's a spellcaster. It's not a dark though. So this is like a cool little option if you really want to play with. But I think that the deck would value some more back row personally. So we're going to give this deck Wall of Disruption. And with that, we fixed up Arkana. The deck was already good on its own, but with these changes, it takes it to a whole new level, and I really like the way it came out. But give me your thoughts. Alright then, so we're now onto the last deck, and that's Strings. And Strings has a interesting deck to say the least. So essentially, we are dealing with like some reactor slime shenanigans, and we also have Slifer in the deck. It's just such a wacky deck. Let's go ahead and actually pivot real quick to the skills for the strategy. We have 2 very different skills. The first one being Slimy Disposition, which is a really neat fusion skill that allows you to fusion summon out your humanoid Worm Drake by using either a face-up Worm Drake or the humanoid slime on your field. And that's kind of neat. Not only that, but like once per turn you're also able to special summon either like the slime or the Worm Drake from your graveyard, and it kind of gives you like some board presence like continuously. As for the second skill in Slimy Slimes, this is a really interesting skill which tries to make Jam Breeding Machine and Revival Jam good cards, question mark. Essentially you're able to tribute off a Jam Breeding Machine to pop an opponent's back row, or when Revival Jam gets destroyed and special summon off its own effect, you get to draw 3 cards, and that's kind of neat in my opinion. Honestly, it's up to you which version of the deck you decide to play. Personally, I think I'm gonna go with Slimy Slimes just because we have Slifer in the deck and we need to try and make this kind of work. So let's talk about the changes that I ended up making. So first things first, I wanted to go ahead and get rid of 2 of the most frustrating cards in this deck, those being Sinister Serpent and Magical Reflex Slime. One's a Gemini that is just not good at all, and the other one is a monster that does literally nothing in the deck because of its errata. Next up, we're going to be adding in some value cards into the deck in order to like have some versatility here. And the first thing we're going to be adding in is Giant Rat. Giant Rat is really cool, especially when you consider the fact that the deck is all water and earth. Giant Rat in particular can special summon out your Mukas and or your Worm Drake from the deck, which is really big, while Mother Grizzly is able to special summon out like your Humanoid Slimes, your Revival Jams, or even your Reactor Slime, which is really neat. Next card that we're going to be adding in kind of counts as a monster in Metal Reflex Slime. This card is phenomenal, especially when you pair it up with Reactor Slime. It works really well. It's a great defensive card and it gives you board presence, so I like it a lot. After that, we're going to be going ahead and removing infinite cards. Now, infinite cards, I get why we have it here, especially because of the ability to draw that many cards off the effect of the skill of Revival Jam, but honestly, your back row is going to get clogged really badly with a lot of the cards that we have in here. Like, take into consideration, we have Token Stampede, Stolen Wishes, Jam Defender, what else? Jam Breeding Machines, plural, clogging out the back row. So having infinite cards just seems like so redundant, so we're going to be removing it. And instead, we're going to be adding in Swords of Revealing Light, just because the deck, it's going to struggle to like have established what it needs. So if you're able to give yourself multiple turns in order to establish it, then that's going to be really good for you. The last card that I would consider removing would be something like Token Stampede, maybe Poly. You can make an argument from maybe even like a Jam Defender. And the main reason I say that is because, again, we have so many like continuous trap cards in the deck already, and if you decide to play with Slimy Disposition, you don't need Poly whatsoever. So it's completely up to you. But if you decide to cut one more card from the deck, I would say that go ahead and then add Jar of Avarice into the strategy. The main reason I say this is because this allows you to go ahead and have a lot more consistency moving forward. If you go ahead and use up all your copies of Jam Braiding Machine throughout a duel, you can go ahead and shuffle it back into the deck to get access to them once again later on. So I feel like this card is definitely something to consider. Personally, you know what? I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and cut Muka Muka, because we can just special summon out the enraged Muka Muka off the effect of Giant Rat. So I feel like we can do better than Muka Muka, so we can remove that and add in the Jar of Avarice. But yeah, I think we fixed up Strings' deck. Is it optimal? No, not really. But we still tried to keep the sanctity of what the deck was trying to do originally. But I don't know, man. Give me your thoughts in the comment section below. What would you have done differently? But yeah, I don't know. Give me your thoughts. Alright guys, and with that, this pretty much concludes today's video. But yeah, so Streets of Battle City was a really cool set to cover, just because a lot of the changes that I could make for the deck didn't have to be outside changes, which I always appreciate. And for the most part, I think all those decks that I ended up changing feel significantly stronger and feel like they can compete with everything else in the format. Kinda. At least it's not like a curve stomp anymore. But yeah, in the comment section below, give me your thoughts. What changes did you like? What changes did you not like? What would you have done differently? Are you excited to try out the changes that I made into your own SpeedDuel little tournaments? Share everything in the comment section below. But as usual guys, if you did end up enjoying today's video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel is the best way of showing your support to me. As usual guys, thank you so much for the support, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.